Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to use Audacity to data bend images into glitch art. Here's what you're going to need: Audacity and an image. You may also want a photo editor like Photoshop, or this is Glimpse. You may also want a hex editor. This is a hex editor called Bliss, but these last two things aren't strictly speaking necessary. If you don't already have Audacity on your computer, the first thing you need to do is download and install it, and you can get it from audacityteam.org. Make sure you get it from here. If you find it from any other source and they ask you for money for it, that's a trick. Audacity is free, it's open source, and you should not have to pay for it. Just make sure you download the right version, go to Download Audacity, find the one for your operating system, and follow the instructions. Your first step is to prepare the image you want to work on. I've got two copies of the same image here. The one on the top is a JPEG, the one on the bottom is a BMP. They look the same, but there are some important differences. The one on the top is smaller, the one on the bottom is larger. The JPEG is smaller because it's compressed. And what we want here are uncompressed images that are as much as possible just an array of pixels, and that's what the BMP is going to give us. By the way, you should make sure that your computer is set up to display file extensions. File extensions are the part at the end there where it says .jpeg and where it says .bmp. That's how your computer knows what software to use to open the file. It's also what you're going to need to know and pay attention to as you figure out which files to work on in the next step. Let me show you something else that's interesting about these two different file formats. This is the file on top opened in a hex editor. A hex editor lets me look at the raw data that's stored inside this file. And it doesn't make much sense if I just read through it, but I do know a few things about this kind of file that help me navigate what I'm seeing. This is a JPEG, and I can tell that because it uses the JFIF or JFIF JPEG file interchange format algorithm, and it signals the computer that's processing this image that this is what it needs to do with it by using what's called a header here. There's some other information in here. This is a pretty simple JPEG file, but these headers can be very long and complex. They can encode information about the camera that's being used, the dimensions of it, the color format, and other things. This one's pretty simple, so actually the header ends right about here where it says FFDA in hex code. The thing about a header in a JPEG file is that it is giving the computer instructions for how to process the image, and if we do anything to damage this information here, the file won't be readable anymore and it'll be broken. We are interested in breaking things when we're creating glitch art, but this could end up so broken that we wouldn't be able to view it at all, and that's not our goal. This is the hex view of the bitmap version of the same image file, and the part that I have highlighted here is the entire header for this file. Everything after this is pixel data, and that's what I'm going to be manipulating in Audacity. This gives me a lot more room to work with, and it lowers the risk of damaging the file beyond the point where I can actually view it. This is the version of the file that you want to work with. Now, the images you have to work with on your computer are probably JPEGs, so you'll probably need to convert them into BMP files. You can do that in lots of different ways. I used Glimpse in this case. You might want to use Photoshop. There's also a tool called Cloud Convert that I find really convenient for doing these kinds of file conversions. This is cloudconvert.com. It's a free service that lets you convert a file from one format into another format. It's very convenient. I use it all the time. Here's how you do that with a JPEG file. I'm just going to click the big Select File button, find my JPEG, and it uploads here. Then I select what format I want to convert to. It's BMP in this case. You could do all kinds of other conversions, but we don't need to right now. Just hit convert, give it a few seconds. And when it's done, you get this download link. Just click the button. Make sure you pay attention to the file name that you download and make sure it ends in BMP in this case. And just keep track of where it is. I like to put these all on my desktop when I'm working on them. Once you have at least one BMP file, you're ready to move on to step 2. Now that I've converted the image and made sure I know which file is which, I need to import it into Audacity. There are a few parts of this process that are not totally intuitive, and you need to make sure you do it the right way or else it's going to cause problems later on, so make sure you watch how I do this. When you go to import it, you are not opening this file. It's not a project or an audio file. You're importing it. So make sure you choose import and then raw data as the option. And after you've selected your file, then you need to make sure to check these settings. For encoding, I recommend ULAW, and for the byte order, Little Endian is fine, and for channels, I suggest mono just to keep things simple. And that should be fine. When you click import, it looks like this. What you're seeing here is actually the waveform of the image file as though it were audio, and this gives us kind of a picture of what it would sound like. You're welcome to play it back and listen to it if you'd like. I'm not going to do that here because it's extremely loud and unusual sounding, Some people actually enjoy that kind of sound though, and you're welcome to try it out. Just make sure your speakers aren't up very high if you do that. Now that we've got the image data imported into Audacity, we're ready to move on to step 3. Step 3 is kind of the fun part, but you don't really get to see how fun it is until step 4 when you can view the result. Steps 3 and 4 are actually an iterative process. So you try something in step 3 and then you see the result in step 4 and then you go back and forth through that process until you're happy with the result. Remember, Audacity is audio editing software, and so what we're going to do is apply some audio filters to this image and then see what difference it makes visually. We can find these under the Effects menu. So there's lots of them you can look through here, and some of them have settings or things you can do after the fact. But to apply a filter, first you need to select some part of the image. Now, remember in the hex editor, I was talking about the header part. That's just the first few bytes of data. And in the audio view of this file, that's the first couple of milliseconds at the beginning of the file. You don't want to mess with those. That can still cause problems even with a bitmap file. So let's take some other section, let's say kind of the second half of the audio bit here. You notice I clicked and dragged to select it, and now I'm going to apply an effect. Let's say, oh, I like the echo effect. And you can try different settings here, and that's the iterative process I'm talking about, but let's just stick with that for now and see how it does change the waveform, so it has manipulated the data a bit here. It might be kind of subtle, but hopefully we'll be able to tell the result. Now that I've applied an echo effect to part of this file, I want to export the results as an image and see what it looks like. This is a part of the process that can get tricky, or it can be easy to miss a step, so make sure you watch how I do this. I'm going to go to export and then export audio. I'm not selecting an audio format. When I go down here, I have lots of different options for the export format. And the one I want is actually uncompressed. Remember, compression is what I'm trying to avoid here. So I want to go to other uncompressed files. And once I do that, then it lets me select a header. I want to add as little as possible to this file. So I want to select the option that says raw and in parentheses headerless. And for encoding, just leave it on ULAW, which was the same as it imported as. I'll hit save. Actually, before I hit save, I'm going to name this in a way that I can identify it later and remember what effect I added. So I'll call it machoman-echo.bmp because this is still hopefully going to be a BMP file. Hit save, yes. I'm going to replace this one, and yes. Okay, great. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference here. There's kind of a band across the top. His fingers look a little sparkly, but I think we can add some more effects and make this look even more interesting. The echo effect was okay, but pretty subtle, like I suspected. So let's see if we can do some more things to this file to make it look a little bit more interesting. I'm going to go through the whole process of importing and editing and then exporting again so you can see that one more time. Let's go to File, Import, Raw Data, and let me choose it here. I've been practicing a lot, as you can see here. So for encoding, I'm going to keep it on, I'm going to switch it to ULAW again and keep everything else the same. Import it, and there we go. Now with a little bit of experimentation, I found I can get pretty close to the beginning of the file. The header, which is the part I don't want to touch, is in the very beginning of the file, and in my experimentation it seems to be up to, I was able to edit up to 0.1 seconds, and so probably could go earlier. It's probably that little part of the waveform there, but I think this is probably a pretty good place to try. I'm going to zoom out again a little bit. And this should be, I think, pretty safe for me to start selecting some text to, not text, but some data to manipulate. So I'm going to select pretty much the whole thing here, if I can. What you also discover is that the left side of the waveform, or the front of the audio, is actually the bottom of the image. So when you're trying to manipulate different parts of it, that's one of the things you'll figure out. So if you're trying to target a particular part of it, you kind of need to strategize where within the image you want to apply an effect to. So let's apply an effect, and let's try just inverting the whole thing. Let's go to invert, and there it goes. Just switched it all around. All right, let's see what that looks like. Let's go to File, Export, Export Audio. Remember, keep it on the same encoding that it came in as, raw headerless as the output header, which is, we don't want a header. And let's say, we'll call this one all inverted .bmp, and let's see. Now the risky thing is always if you accidentally manipulate part of the header, it may not work. But let's take a look at this, and yeah, indeed, okay. Much more dramatic. I like that a lot. It actually did a pretty nice job of inverting the colors, which sort of makes sense, right? But there it is. There's Macho Man in a slightly different view. And if you can see at the very bottom, there is a tiny little row of pixels that were unaffected, and that's the part that I didn't select. So I could have gone even farther to the left towards the beginning of the file and kept the header intact. And that's pretty much it. It's not quite it though, because once you've created some images that you like, your final step is to share it somehow. Remember way back at the start of this video where I compared two versions of the same image file? One is much larger than the other. Now that we've manipulated the file, we haven't really changed the file size, but if you look at how big this file is, 867 kilobytes, that's a lot to ask somebody to download on their phone. So we need to make sure to compress this to a smaller size to make it easier to share. Again, I like using Cloud Convert for these kind of simple conversions. Here's Cloud Convert again, very much the same process but in reverse. First, let's select the file we want to convert, and let's do this last one I produced. And let's select JPEG as the conversion. I'll hit convert, and should just take a few seconds. And there it is. It's ready for me to download. Click the download button and save it. And as you can see, the glitched JPEG ended up being a little bit bigger, but it's still much smaller than the glitched BMP. And now that it's a smaller file, it's much easier for me to upload it to somewhere like Twitter, Reddit, send it over Facebook, whatever you like to do with this file. And that was how you can use Audacity to create glitched versions of images. I hope it was interesting and helpful. If you have any questions, let me know.